Good afternoon, everyone. Carolina Weather Authority's meteorologist Joshua Nagelberg with the latest on Hurricane Delta and now a hurricane watch in effect for a good chunk of the Louisiana coastline. Louisiana, for those of you not from there like I am. Okay. But please subscribe to our YouTube channel. This is a serious storm, and I'm going to give you guys my best thoughts and best forecast. Yesterday's video, I'm not going to say we jumped the gun because, to be honest with you all, there was some very good signs of continued rapid intensification, but honestly, it came to a stop. We're very fortunate that that happened, or things would look a lot worse in places like Cancun this morning, but nonetheless, still a powerful large storm, and I'm going to talk more about it. So subscribe to our YouTube channel so that you can have the latest, and of course, show your support to us as well, and ask any questions of us. We will certainly try to do our best to get those right. So the tropics are very fun to forecast, and unfortunately, we've got ourselves another potentially major hurricane hit on Louisiana at the end of this week. Currently, we've got a Category 2 storm about to reemerge over water. It's spent this morning over the northeastern Yucatan. It made landfall about 20 miles south of Cancun, just north of Cozumel, and fortunate for Cancun because it could have been much worse. However, there's still quite a bit of damage that I'm seeing out there from videos from some of the storm chasers like Reed Timmer. But anyway, what we're looking at here is a more agreeable storm track, which now puts southwestern Louisiana under the gun here for a direct strike on Friday. The intensity could be anywhere from perhaps a high-end Category 3 to a high-end Category 1 when it comes in. I don't want you to get too obsessed with those winds, though, because the storm is actually going to grow in size due to some atmospheric processes that take place when the storm moves farther north into increasing jet stream energy. Usually the jet stream makes the storm larger, and we can start to see the storm growing in size right now. So even if the winds are not as strong when this comes on shore as it will be at its peak, the area of winds could be larger. So what that means is we could have a larger area of damaging storm surge and wind damage along and just to the east of where this center comes on shore. Our current track takes it on shore late in the day on Friday or early in the evening Friday night, and the intensity probably somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 120 miles per hour at its maximum. Pressure will probably be in the 940s to low 950s, which makes it slightly less intense than Hurricane Laura. But the thing that certainly gets me, and I'm sure gets the folks of southwest Louisiana, is that we've got once again another hurricane threat and a storm that's going to be a pretty powerful hurricane when it comes in. And there's still guidance that is showing the track potentially could be left of where we have it right now over the same place that got hit, which is Cameron Parish back in the end of August of this year, which is pretty crazy. So the good news is that it is going to weaken pretty rapidly over land, but could produce quite a bit of flooding rain along its and to its northwest by the time it gets into the Tennessee Valley over the weekend and into parts of the mid-Atlantic states by Sunday night, Monday morning. There could also be severe weather on the eastern side of the track that could include Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Houma, Thibodaux, and then that stretches northeastward towards Jackson. So there's a threat maybe of some tornadoes after the storm comes on shore. Puts northern Alabama, middle and eastern Tennessee, western and central Carolinas, and Virginia at risk for some of those storms that could produce locally strong winds as well as tornadoes. So that's something we're going to keep an eye on. Man, in Florida, are you guys lucky? We've dodged yet another one here. A couple days ago, it looked like Florida was going to be under the gun, but that was before this storm formed and before we knew how strong the high-pressure ridge ended up being. It's kind of been a common theme where the Central Gulf has been hit because we've had high pressure near to the east of Florida all summer long. Pretty crazy stuff. All right, so here's the Hurricane Center forecast. Winds are 105 miles per hour. That's a high-end Category 2. The storm is about to reemerge over water. Conditions should gradually improve over the northeastern Yucatan, but the storm's going to go right over Isla Perez, which is a wildlife refuge off of the Yucatan coast. And then when it gets into here, we expect it to strengthen back to major hurricane status. The Gulf of Mexico waters, while not as warm as the Northwest Caribbean, are still warm and support a strengthening storm, also a growing storm. So that's one thing I do want to make clear to you guys, and that strengthening will probably start this evening and probably peak tomorrow afternoon or evening. So we could have a Category 3 or even a 4 storm over here in the west central Gulf of Mexico. Also, the farther west the storm potentially goes, the more warm water it can feed off of. The farther east, it's a little bit cooler due to waters that have been churned up by the recent cold front and by recent storms such as Beta, and Laura and Sally, which all impacted the central Gulf Coast region. The storm should weaken upon and just before landfall, so if there's any good news, and I don't want you to get too obsessed with it, it's that the storm will not be hitting at its peak, just like it did with the Yucatan, and that's something we haven't seen too much this year. We've actually seen storms strengthen up until they've hit, which such was the case with Laura and Sally and Isaias. But the storm should weaken pretty steadily as it gets inland into central Louisiana and northeast Louisiana. It should be a storm by the time we get to Saturday morning, and a remnant low by the time it's up here into the mid-south and then the mid-Atlantic region. Hurricane watches have just been posted for much of the Louisiana coast and the upper Texas coast, with tropical storm watches for greater New Orleans, southwest Mississippi, as well as the Houston, Galveston area due to the increasing wind field we're expecting. However, right now, it looks like the worst of the wind is likely to be somewhere in south central Louisiana, getting up into Acadiana. Let me show you all what the map of Louisiana looks like. This is where Laura hit, right over Cameron, with the worst wind affecting places like Creole, Grand Chenier, the Calcasieu Lake, and Lake Charles. The strongest winds were on the eye wall. This storm is expected to go about 50 miles down the coast towards Pecan Island, and the eye wall could impact places like Marsh Island, Avery Island, where the famous Tabasco plant is, Abbeville, could even affect New Iberia, Broussard, and Lafayette, and Carencro, maybe even all the way up to Opelousas. We could have hurricane conditions. If the track shifts right, that could put places like Franklin and Morgan City and all the way up the Morganza Spillway towards Baton Rouge in the threat for the heaviest wind. If it shifts west, then unfortunately, those of you that are in places that have been uninhabitable after Laura are going to get a second punch right in the mouth, and I really hope that doesn't happen, but that's still on the table at this point. The worst of the storm surge will hit east of the center, and that water could funnel all the way up Vermilion Bay and get into some of these towns and here across lower parts of Cajun country. This area very vulnerable to storm surge, and a storm hitting here, which is not a place that typically has seen hurricanes hit in Louisiana, could produce some unprecedented storm surge in places in St. Mary Parish, Vermilion Parish, maybe even into the Lafayette area. So that's something that we're concerned with as well. So, of course, that can change, but that's what it's looking like right now. Here is a look at the storm, and we can see the loop dating back to yesterday. What happened? We thought this was going to Cat 5, if I could be honest with you. Well, there was wind shear from the east, and it actually disrupted the core of the storm, which never fully closed off. It had a pinwheel eye of 4 miles. You could see it on the radar, but not necessarily on the satellite because of the cloud cover. See these fast winds streaming in from the east? Well, they ended up being about 15 knots higher than forecast. So all the rapid intensification models that were showing this getting to 4 and 5 yesterday afternoon ended up being overdone. And fortunately, the pressure leveled off after my video yesterday, and then winds started to drop off in response to that yesterday evening. And the storm hit as a high-end Category 2 or low 3. So Cancun did not get leveled. They still took on a lot of damage, of course. But the thing that I am watching is that the size of the storm is starting to grow. And I do think when it gets here into the southern Gulf, it will grow more and an eye should form. We should have pretty ideal conditions for intensification, as the wind shear should drop off. The water temperatures, of course, are still pretty warm, not as warm as the Caribbean. And just some favorable conditions aloft for the storm to re-intensify in a 24 to 48 hour stretch here starting tonight or overnight tonight. So that's what I'll be watching. Here's the visible loop. You can see the center getting ready to move off the coast. This is Isla Perez. It's going to go right over this island and cause winds to get over 100 miles per hour on the island and cause a lot of damage there. And then the track goes into the southern Gulf. And I'll show you the forecast track models. The consensus is actually very well clustered over Acadiana and the eastern part of southwest Louisiana. No model showing a hit on New Orleans or Houma at this point. Everything's west of Morgan City. There is one model, that's a Canadian, that takes a track very close to where Rita hit over Sabine Pass. But the majority of the guidance takes this landfall near the Cameron and Vermilion Parish border on the southwest Louisiana coast, and then makes a right bend pretty significantly here and takes a storm east of Alexandria, near or west of Jackson, and up into the middle part of Tennessee. Intensity guidance shows us a Category 3 storm is likely again after the storm spends a few more hours over water. It could happen as soon as maybe late this afternoon, more likely though tonight. There's some intensity guidance that goes back to Category 4, which would not surprise me one bit. I do think Category 5 is probably going to end up being way too high at this point. However, we could see a storm that gets into the 930s, which would be maybe 140 or 150 mile per hour storm, which gets it right to where Laura is. But with landfall expected here in just after 48 hours, we should see the intensity actually drop before landfall, and it's most likely going to be either a high-end Category 2 or a low-end Category 3. But the drop-off is significant as the water cools near the Gulf Coast due to recent storms that have churned the water up and recent cooler air coming down as we've enjoyed some cold fronts recently. So it should not be intensifying as it's hitting like Laura did. It should actually be weakening. Maybe not quickly, but some. And finally, let's take a look at the HWRF model, and you can see intensification likely on this tropical model with pressures down to 940 here by tomorrow evening. And then dropping into the 930s potentially. So it could be close to as strong as Laura was at its peak, which was at landfall, and then gradually rising pressure showing that it does weaken some. But look how large this storm is. It could cover a good chunk of Louisiana with hurricane conditions, especially this area, I think, here. And then as we get to Friday night, it should weaken over land, but the potential for this eye wall to go over Lafayette or maybe over Breaux Bridge, or perhaps even towards Port Allen, New Roads, and areas like Opelousas could see hurricane conditions from this before the storm does churn down pretty quickly. If you look at the HWRF model, it's a little bit less intense as the HMON's a little less intense than the HWRF, but still shows a major hurricane in the north central Gulf with landfall very close to where we're seeing the other model showing it, and that's around 3, 4, 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon. The global models are a little bit slower. I have seen the GFS come in just a little bit slower here, but still showing that intensification into the 960s, maybe 950s, and then leveling off as we get to Friday morning. And then we'll start to see the pressure coming up just a little bit. But this is not really showing much weakening before it hits Friday afternoon or early evening, pretty much in the same exact spot. The Canadian European, by the way, have landfall farther to the west over Cameron Parish, with pressures around the same as what the GFS shows. So that is still on the table for you guys. Don't let your guard down in Cameron Parish. I know you're very storm weary, but you know the window goes all the way over into close to the Beaumont Port Arthur area and as far east as maybe south of New Orleans. Although I think more likely in here at this point we're going to see that landfall. All right, folks. Well, I'm glad you guys got to join me today. Leave some comments, of course. Be polite. Remember, nobody's perfect here. The storm's going to change again. The forecast will change. We're going to do our very best, though, of course, to keep you guys posted on the latest, of course. Feel free to subscribe to our YouTube channel and show your support, and I hope you all have a wonderful day. God bless.